The plan to destroy the U.S. fleet was entrusted to Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Yamamoto was no fool. He had studied in America. He knew its vast industrial power. He warned the Japanese High Command, "In the first 6 to 12 months of a war with the United States and Britain, I will run wild, but I have utterly no confidence for the second or third year." Despite his warnings, Yamamoto prepared a daring preemptive strike on Pearl Harbor, the main base of the U.S. Pacific Fleet in Hawaii. The objectives were twofold: sink a battleship, for propaganda, to humiliate America and sap its morale. Disable the fleet for at least 6 months, giving Japan time to conquer the Indies and fortify its gains. Carriers and naval yards were not primary targets. Japan was betting on a short war. To accomplish this, Yamamoto formed a powerful task force, Kido Butai, the most advanced carrier strike group in the world. It included 6 fleet carriers, over 350 aircraft, and months of secret training. Accompanying the aerial strike were 5 midget submarines, intended to penetrate the harbor and attack in coordination with the main assault. The attack was scheduled for Sunday morning, December 7, 1941. At 6 a.m., the first wave of 183 Japanese aircraft launched from carriers stationed north of Hawaii. Their crews had trained for this moment for nearly a year. They approached the island in radio silence, flying low across the sea. The skies above Oahu were clear. The radar station at Opana Point picked up the incoming planes, but the alert was misread as a returning flight of American B-17s. No alarm was raised. At 7:55 a.m., the first bombs fell on Ford Island, in the center of Pearl Harbor. Dive bombers roared in from the east. Torpedo bombers skimmed the waters of the harbor. Within minutes, the USS Utah, an old target ship mistaken for a battleship, was struck by 2 torpedoes and capsized. Nearby, the USS Raleigh was hit, and the USS Helena took a torpedo that had passed beneath a mine layer. Ships moored together magnified the damage, mistaken identities and miscommunications led to confused targeting. But the real target lay ahead, Battleship Row. Just off Ford Island, a row of immense grey warships sat anchored in calm water. They were America's pride, 8 battleships, moored close together. Some were undergoing maintenance. Others had open hatches for morning inspections. Almost all were unprepared for war. At 7:57 a.m., the first torpedo bombers from Akagi swept in, flying low and straight down the southeastern lock of the harbor, their approach dictated by geography. Any other route would have exposed them to turbulence and delayed attack windows. Instead of a dispersed strike, nearly all the Japanese torpedoes converged on the southern tip of Battleship Row, where the USS Oklahoma and USS West Virginia lay broadside to the attackers. The result would be catastrophic. 12 Akagi torpedo bombers came in, one after the other, 1,000 feet apart. All but one launched torpedoes at Oklahoma and West Virginia. That one veered off and struck USS California. Soon after, 4 more planes from Hiryu joined in, attacking the same targets. Wave after wave closed in. Japanese pilots faced intense anti-aircraft fire, far more severe than they had anticipated. The early warning from the bombs that had fallen on Ford Island just minutes earlier gave gunners time to man their stations. Still, the torpedo bombers pressed on, slow, vulnerable, and unflinching. One American sailor, manning a .50 caliber gun aboard the USS Nevada, later recalled, "They just kept coming. Like ghosts over the water." Behind Akagi came Kaga's bombers. Anti-aircraft fire intensified. Of the last 7 torpedo planes in that wave, 5 were shot down. But the damage was done. USS Oklahoma took 5 torpedo hits in under 10 minutes. Her hull buckled. She capsized by 8:10 a.m., trapping over 400 men inside. USS West Virginia was struck by 7 torpedoes, her crew managing to counter-flood quickly to keep her from capsizing. She settled to the bottom, fires raging. USS California, though only hit by 2 torpedoes, began to list. Her open hatches and a poor state of readiness led to progressive flooding. She was abandoned and later sank. USS Nevada, moored at the end of the row, was struck but still afloat, and capable of moving. In all, 36 torpedoes were launched in the first wave. 19 made contact, a hit rate of roughly 53%. In the narrow confines of Pearl Harbor, it was devastating. And then, the sky began to fall. From 10,000 feet, Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who had led the first wave, directed a formation of high-level bombers, Kates equipped with armor-piercing bombs. Their mission was precise: destroy the inboard battleships, the ones unreachable by torpedoes due to the harbor's layout. They arrived over target at 8 a.m. Each bomber flew in groups of 5. They lined up with deliberate care, targeting the clustered ships below. They achieved an impressive 20% hit rate. But there was a fatal flaw in the Japanese plan: many bombs were defective. Of the 10 known bomb hits, 6 were low-order detonations or complete duds. Several failed to penetrate armored decks. One even bounced off and exploded harmlessly nearby. But 2 hits would change history. The USS Arizona, a Pennsylvania-class battleship, stood out on the row, immense, proud, and fully manned. At 8:06 a.m., a Japanese armor-piercing bomb plunged through her deck near Turret 2 and ignited her forward magazine. What followed was one of the most violent non-nuclear explosions ever witnessed. The Arizona was ripped in half. A fireball shot into the air. Flames engulfed the ship. Over 1,170 sailors were killed instantly. Aboard the hospital ship Solace, U.S. Navy Dr. Eric Harkinson captured the moment on film. His footage shows a column of smoke and fire that seems to reach the heavens. Arizona's remains still rest beneath the water, now a national memorial. Amidst the devastation, USS Nevada made a daring move. Though damaged, her crew managed to get steam up and set her in motion at 8:40 a.m., making her the only battleship to get underway during the attack. She became an immediate target. Dive bombers from the second wave spotted the moving ship and swarmed it, hoping to sink her in the channel and block access to the harbor. Nevada was struck 5 more times. Fires broke out. Damage piled up. At 9:10 a.m., her crew beached her intentionally to avoid sinking in the narrow harbor entrance. Her courage would be remembered, but it also underscored the Japanese obsession with battleship prestige. Aircraft, airfields, and vital infrastructure were ignored in favor of targets that would look good in propaganda. As the first wave pulled back, fires engulfed the harbor. The air was thick with smoke. Shouts echoed across the water. Japanese commanders reviewed the results with grim satisfaction. Battleships Oklahoma, West Virginia, and California were sinking or sunk. Arizona was obliterated. Nevada was disabled. Other ships like Raleigh, Helena, and Vestal suffered serious damage. But not everything had gone according to plan. The U.S. carriers were not present, a stroke of immense luck for the Americans. The naval yard, fuel tanks, and submarine base, critical infrastructure, remained untouched. Several torpedoes and bombs had failed to detonate. And anti-aircraft fire had taken an unexpected toll, 9 Japanese planes lost in the first wave alone. Still, the first wave had achieved strategic success. The Pacific Fleet was crippled, at least on paper. But the attack was only halfway finished. At 8:54 a.m., just as smoke was still billowing from the broken hull of the Arizona and the Nevada was trying to beach herself, the second wave of Japanese aircraft began its assault on Pearl Harbor. This force, 167 aircraft in total, was composed mainly of dive bombers, supported by fighters and horizontal bombers. These were some of the most well-trained pilots in Japan. They had drilled relentlessly, confident in their ability to hit moving ships with pinpoint accuracy. But what awaited them was no longer a quiet harbor. Unlike the first wave, the defenders were ready. The Japanese had designated a clear priority list: remaining battleships, aircraft carriers, still absent, cruisers and destroyers, fuel depots, maintenance facilities, and naval infrastructure. But the second wave pilots were not as disciplined as their orders demanded. Instead of focusing on the vital targets, fuel depots, dry docks, clustered cruisers in vulnerable positions, many pilots opted for prestige, battleships, symbols of national pride. And some simply went off course entirely. One striking example, the USS Shore, a destroyer sitting in a floating dry dock. It looked like a capital ship. As many as 15 dive bombers targeted her, and she was hit by 3 bombs, one of which ignited a massive fireball when her forward magazines exploded. The blast became one of the most iconic images of the entire attack. But strategically, it was a waste. Why this poor target selection? The answer may lie in culture and mindset. These Japanese aviators, many in their 20s, were participating in what they believed was the most significant battle in Japan's modern history. For them, returning home and reporting that you had bombed a cruiser, or worse, a destroyer, was shameful. A battleship, on the other hand? That was glory. This samurai-like fixation on honor targets influenced many decisions. Planes ignored the naval yard, where 4 modern 10-ton cruisers were moored close together. They skipped over the fuel depots, which could have crippled Pearl Harbor for months had they been destroyed. Even the submarine base, key to U.S. Pacific operations, was mostly spared. The result was a second wave that looked impressive, but lacked focus. Of the 78 dive bombers in the second wave, about 30 attacked battleships, 17 targeted cruisers, 16 went after destroyers, only 12 struck auxiliaries or facilities. A case study in missed opportunity, the USS Phoenix, a modern light cruiser docked at the naval yard. She was completely ignored, despite being vulnerable and clearly exposed. Another example, the dry dock area, where the USS Pennsylvania, fleet flagship, was undergoing repairs. 9 bombers attacked her, but only 1 hit was scored. Nearby destroyers Cassin and Downs, unfortunately caught in the blast, suffered far worse damage due to secondary explosions. Still, the worst loss came not from precision but persistence. The USS Nevada, already limping from the first wave, was caught in open water and targeted by up to 18 bombers. She was hit 5 more times before beaching herself at 9:10 a.m. This was the shining moment of the second wave, but it deserves criticism. The odds of sinking Nevada in the channel and blocking Pearl Harbor were extremely low. Yet pilots attacked her obsessively, wasting ordnance that might have devastated other high-value targets. Of the 167 planes in the second wave, 78 were dive bombers tasked with disabling key warships. Only 15 bombs scored hits accuracy rate, 19%, a far cry from the 55% rate achieved in training. Even worse, many of the general-purpose bombs used were either ineffective or malfunctioned. Only one top priority target, the USS Raleigh, was seriously damaged by the second wave. The cruiser Honolulu suffered only a near miss. As the planes pulled out by 9:30 a.m., Pearl Harbor was ablaze, but far from crippled. When the smoke cleared, 2,403 Americans were dead, 1,178 wounded, 21 ships were damaged or destroyed, 8 battleships were hit, 2 permanently lost, Arizona and Oklahoma, the rest were either beached, grounded, or later repaired. But perhaps the most consequential detail of the entire day, the U.S. aircraft carriers, Lexington, Enterprise, and Saratoga, were not in port. This stroke of luck would prove decisive in the battles to come. From a military standpoint, Japan had inflicted a serious blow, but not a knockout. Here's what they could have destroyed but didn't: massive fuel depots, holding over 4 million barrels of oil, submarine pens, untouched and fully functional machine shops, dry docks, and repair facilities, all still operable. As Admiral Chester Nimitz would later observe, had they destroyed our oil, the war would have lasted another 2 years. Instead, Pearl Harbor's infrastructure remained largely intact. And within weeks, many of the damaged ships were already being repaired. Japan had awakened a sleeping giant, and left his fists unbroken. In the days following the attack, the scale of devastation became undeniable. Newsreels showed wrecked ships, burned-out airfields, and funerals at sea. Families waited anxiously for word of missing loved ones. Civilians lined up to donate blood. Newspapers printed the names of the dead in page-long columns. And then came the moment that changed everything. At 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time on December 8, 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed a joint session of Congress. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. His voice, steady but steely, rang through every home with a radio. By 12:47, Congress had voted for war. Only one member, Representative Jeanette Rankin of Montana, voted against. The next day, Japan's Axis allies, Germany and Italy, declared war on the United States. In 24 hours, the war that had engulfed Europe and Asia became a truly global conflict. The sleeping giant was now wide awake, and furious. Tactically, Pearl Harbor was a bold success. Operationally, it delayed the Pacific Fleet for several months. But strategically, it was a disaster. Japan had hoped to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet, gain a 6-month window for conquest, force America to negotiate peace. What they got was an intact carrier fleet that would strike back within months. A unified American public, resolved to fight until total victory. An industrial juggernaut, now fully mobilized for war. Even Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the attack, reportedly said, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." Yamamoto understood what many in Tokyo refused to see: the United States had the resources, manpower, and willpower to wage a long, grinding war, and win it. It is tempting to view Pearl Harbor as a devastating, paralyzing blow. But in many ways, the attack failed to achieve its critical goals. 1. The carriers survived. None of the U.S. Navy's 3 Pacific Fleet carriers, Enterprise, Lexington, or Saratoga, were in port. These ships would go on to lead the counteroffensives at Coral Sea, Midway, and beyond. 2. Fuel and repair facilities survived. The Japanese ignored the giant fuel tanks, repair yards, and submarine base. Within weeks, many damaged ships were being refloated and repaired, right there in Pearl Harbor. 3. Submarines were untouched. Ironically, it was America's submarine force, not its battleships, that would go on to devastate Japanese shipping and cripple the Empire's war effort from beneath the waves. The final toll of the attack: 2,403 Americans killed, 1,178 wounded, 18 ships damaged or destroyed, 8 battleships hit, more than 300 aircraft destroyed or damaged on the Japanese side, 29 planes lost, 5 midget submarines lost, 64 attackers killed, 1 pilot captured. Tactically, Japan had spent little to achieve much. But they had also revealed their hand, and handed their enemy a cause. The attack on Pearl Harbor marked the end of isolationism in America. A country once divided over foreign wars was now wholly committed to one. Young men lined up outside recruitment offices. Factories retooled overnight. Women entered the workforce in numbers never seen before. The American war machine, once sleeping, now moved with force and purpose. But the shock of Pearl Harbor also raised questions. How had the warning signs been missed? Why had the radar alerts gone unheeded? Why weren't the ships better prepared? In the months to come, hearings would be held. Commanders relieved. Systems overhauled. Pearl Harbor became more than a military base, it became a symbol of failure, resolve, and transformation. Film frames echoes through history. The attack's impact went far beyond December 1941. It inspired national unity, but also wartime hysteria, leading to the unjust internment of Japanese Americans. It reshaped naval doctrine, proving that aircraft carriers, not battleships, would dominate modern war. It led to the Battle of Midway, 6 months later, where America, using carrier-based air power, would destroy 4 Japanese carriers and begin to turn the tide. And perhaps most profoundly, it set the course for a new kind of warfare, total war on a global scale. Today, the wreck of the USS Arizona still lies beneath the water at Pearl Harbor. Her rusted frame seeps oil into the sea, a slow, silent reminder of the lives lost that morning. Visitors stand in silence at the memorial above her. They look into the water, at the outline of a sunken ship, and remember what happened when war came to America's shores. Pearl Harbor is no longer just a place. It is a lesson, a warning, a name that echoes in the history of nations. Yesterday, December 7, 1941. And the world was never the same again.